Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Cubtalk. We're here with a very special guest, Rico Garza, and I'm going to give him a chance right now to introduce himself a little bit. And yeah.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Rico Garza. I serve as the assistant director for our McNair Scholars Program here at Baylor. I work with our Adelante Success program as well. And I work with some other groups like HSA, our Hispanic Student Association, and ODFI on campus. So thank you so much, man, for having me.
Of course.
Be here. Yeah.
So my first question for you is, where's home for you, and how do you think that impacts the way you see the world?
Yeah, so born and raised San Antonio, Texas. So, growing up in San Antonio, it's a big city but with kind of like a small town feel. So I think, growing up, it was primarily, all Hispanics, Latinos kind of in my high school. I went to a small private like Christian school for a majority of my time. I went to public school for a couple of years in high school, but ended up going back. But yeah, man, it was pretty much just like there's one white kid in our whole grade, one black girl, and that's pretty much what I was kind of raised in. The other interesting thing, I think maybe it was with San Antonio, or maybe it was just the high school area, is that very little of us spoke Spanish. And so it was very much just like, just nobody spoke Spanish. And so I kind of like, my parents grew up speaking like very fluent. My grandma's fluent, but my mom, I guess, didn't want me to have like the accent going into high school and going into professional life and things like that. So we spoke very little Spanish. Now I regret it because I'm like, there's so many things, man. Yeah, that
part I share too. Like my grandparents, on my dad's side are fluent. They're from Mexico, so they're like their first language is Spanish. My dad's first language is Spanish, but he didn't want to teach it to me, my brother, because like when he went to school, he was bullied for like having the accent and not knowing English. So yeah, it's definitely like I share the same. Like I wish I knew Spanish now, but it's like the total opposite of like I talked to Dr. Hinosa a couple weeks ago on the podcast, and he shared his experience and like where everything was like a border tongue and like they mix Spanish and English. It's like we were talking about how it's different, like especially in the Latino community from like Dallas, San Antonio. Like it's like completely different kind of culture kind of going on.
Yeah, it's a lot of like I feel like San Antonio is like the perfect, in my experience, is like that when you think of like Tex-Mex, that's where that kind of perfectly is interwoven into everything you do, and everything you see, all the restaurants and things like I didn't really know, it's funny, I didn't really know what true like authentic Mexican food was until I left San Antonio. Because I was just like, oh, Mexican food, that's like Tex-Mex. I didn't know what Tex-Mex was until somebody was like, oh no, this is like authentic Mexican food. I was like, okay.
Yeah, they sell the Tejano vans at in San Antonio too on the Riverwalk. I always see them. They're like one of the few like cities in Texas that are like Tejano's not dead.
Yeah, it's very active.
But let's see. And then how do you think that like impacts the way you see the world, like even now?
Yeah. I think I was blessed with being able to kind of be in like a cultural kind of hub in that kind of environment. But I guess I see everything in kind of like this family oriented thing, because I think that's what with our culture, with like, Hispanic Latino culture, it's very family oriented. We want to be close to our mom and dad, brothers, sisters, cousins, and things like that. So I think that's the way I kind of approach like my work here at Baylor, is that I'm very intentional with reaching out, hanging out, spending time with the folks I'm working with and working for. And I think I just view the lens of like, we're here to work hard. We're here for a purpose of, providing for our family. And maybe that's not necessarily like helping my parents out yet, but, supporting, the family or my life that's kind of starting to build right now. So pretty young in my profession. And so, starting to make a name for myself. So I kind of view that as like, okay, I left San Antonio, or I have this view of seeing the world as, it's kind of the world is your oyster, but through a lens of, we're here in community. And it's a chance for me to kind of put myself in a spot where I can give back, because San Antonio really built me up, and it showed me kind of all different sides, because I grew up on the west side of San Antonio, so very low income area. Eventually my mom got married, and so we moved out to like one of the suburbs. My dad grew up in one of the more affluent areas, so I would go visit him on the weekends, and so I got to see like all the different parts of it. And so even now when I'm looking at places to live and things, I'm like looking at like, okay, the community, when people would say, "Oh man, you kind of live in like not the nice neighborhood," I'm like, this seems like comfy. Like this is comfortable. Like I feel like I know people. Like I feel like I'm safe. So I kind of have that lens too of, I'm not very like lavish with like spending, very, not out there spending all my money, but I don't know. I think that's part of growing up in like the West Side is like you kind of learn to appreciate kind of what you have and make that go a long way as well. But
I think it's like very common too, and like all of like the at least the first generation college students here at Baylor.
Yeah,
we all kind of share like a similar story where it's like you didn't grow up in the nicest neighborhood, but like you were glad you grew up there because they taught you something. Like I know for my parents, like for them to get me out of Dallas was their like end goal because they're like there was nothing left for me there. They saw it as very much as so it was like if you don't get out, you're just stay here and do the same thing that we did, and fall into like the same little cycle that was going on like in the neighborhood. Because I grew up in a very like low income area, and it was just like there wasn't very many good influences, and everything that was going on was very like it was it was something they didn't want me to be part of. So
and that's the same thing with how I view with San Antonio, because I'm in the process of what's the next chapter. Obviously I'd love to stay here at Baylor, but looking at things like I need to start buying a house, all these things. My parents and my mom specifically, because she raised me by herself pretty much, but like the idea of like, hey, like when are you gonna come back?
Yeah,
it's like, and I feel bad, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, for what? But I think that's what she's instilled in me, is that independence, to be a strong, hardworking person. I think that's same thing with first gen. Once you kind of make it through, that your college time, or make it through like the hard times, you're like, okay, if I can get through that, I can get through anything. So you can kind of build that independence. But it's the same thing. Yeah, it's because I have friends that are still kind of doing the same thing, which is weird, even all these years after college. And I'm just like, I don't know what else I would be doing there.
Yeah, that's kind of like on the boat I'm in right now. Like I'm looking maybe to go back to Dallas, but at the same time, like I'm at a point in my life where it's like I can go anywhere. Like I don't have anything holding me down to one area. I can go to Chicago if I want to next year, and it's like it's fine. So I definitely share that like same aspect and look on things, especially when it comes to like moving back home. And like I don't know if I'm like last thing I want to do is move back home and like never do anything else. So it's like
it's sometimes scary too, because I think you see friends, family that got that one job right out of high school, especially being first gen. It's like my dad, he was a truck driver, and he made decent money, but that's what he did from 18 until now. He's still doing the same thing. And I'm like, I think once you go to college and you get this experience of like the world where you get taught that you can do anything, or you're in an environment where everybody's achieving their goals or has these dreams and things like aspirations, you're like, man, I don't know if I can go back. And
it's just like there's so many things to see and like so little time. It's like, do I want to go back at home? Like, yeah, it's fun going back home, but at the same time, it's like I feel like I've done a lot of things that I need to do. Versus like if I go to a new city or like even just in Waco, there's like a lot of opportunities to like come about.
100%. Yeah.
All right, so my next question for you is, what was your experience like in college, and how did you deal with adversity as a college student?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Northern Iowa, so super random. That's a whole nother story, but a bunch of our high school class, so like I said, small Christian schools, like graduating class of 21 students. And so of that 21, maybe like 6 of us would go each year to that school, mostly because the high school recruiter had a connection with the undergrad recruiter there, so they made a bridge program, so where you can either pay like in-state tuition or you can get like a full tuition scholarship to go out there. And so that was kind of the main thing of pulling students out there. But yeah, going out there, being an out-of-state student, the majority of the population was like, I think it was like 98% white. Not very many Hispanic Latinos, not very many people of color. It was not, I don't want to say it was necessarily like a culture shock, but it was very different. But I think what made it even more interesting was that when I was trying to go into, join the Hispanic Student Association or the, I think it was like Hispanic Latino Student Union, it was all primarily Spanish speakers. And so when I was going, I was like, I have no idea what's happening. Like, I don't know what people were talking about. And they would lead the meetings in Spanish. And I was like, oh man, I don't know. And then, because I think that area, so for context, like in Iowa, it's a big, like Tyson, like big factories. So they get a lot of immigrants coming and working at the factories. And so then their children are usually like the first gen in the country to then go to college. And I went to small liberal arts school that was affordable. And so that's kind of why like a lot of those folks like like spoke or fluent in both English and Spanish, but when they had the chance to speak Spanish, especially at that school, it was like, I'm going to speak Spanish. I was like, I get it.
Yeah.
But I had a hard time fitting in with that group. But then I was able to make friends. I think the Midwest has very nice people. So if you're interested in Chicago, man, I mean, the Midwest has some of the nicest people I've ever met. But I felt very at home. But near my senior year, like I was involved in a whole bunch of stuff. But near my senior year, I found like that I was missing that cultural piece, where I was like whitewashing myself. I was like, it's weird to say this out loud. Like I would even say like I was like a coconut. I was like, I'm white on the inside, brown on the outside. Like it was that much of like trying to find my identity, trying to find my place. And it wasn't until my senior year where I got approached to join a fraternity, Hispanic Latino fraternity, and it was an opportunity. I was like, I'm already involved in all these things, but I just want to join. I'll join just for representation. Some of the guys I knew that were pretty cool. Yeah. I was like, I just want to be a member. I don't want to lead anything, because I was already like exec in this, exec board in that. Kind of similar, like how you're the leader in all these things. I was like, this is the last thing I want to do is try to like invest all this time. But eventually, they're like, hey, we need somebody to step up as president, and we're nominating you. I was like, no. So I was like, oh man. So we did that, and we figured it out for our class. And that was honestly like the first time in my life where I felt like I was proud to be like Hispanic and Latino, and trying to figure out what that meant. And being okay with like a group that was accepting me for like who I was in that space. And it's funny, all my white friends were saying like, oh man, like you don't ever hang out with us anymore. I was like, no, I love y'all. Like y'all are great. But like when I can truly like be myself and joke around and say the things, that you won't necessarily say around a bunch of other students, it's that piece of comfort. And so I think that's kind of what my undergrad was kind of molded by, that last couple like year and a half of joining that group, that I was like, okay, I finally found my people. I can attest to that. I know definitely, like from the students of color I've talked to here at Baylor, it's definitely been a common denominator where it's like they don't necessarily find that little like family, or like find an area where they could talk the way they want to talk, or speak the way they want to speak until like later in college. I know that's why a lot of people transfer out of Baylor, especially within the first year and a half. It's very hard, and it gets very like lonely, because I know I was in that position where I didn't necessarily find my group of friends until like maybe my sophomore year. That's when I really found like everybody. Like I found like Stephanie, Andrick, and everybody like that. And then I joined a fraternity, and that obviously helped. So I like joining a fraternity honestly did help, because you have like a built-in support system. Yeah, like, exactly.
But like I know you said you went to school in Northern Iowa and you're from San Antonio. Like how did like the homesickness go away? Because like I know I'm from Dallas, and I'm like it got to me, especially my first year.
Yeah, it's tough. I think the first time because normally I think it was like, and I don't know if my parents didn't necessarily shelter me, but I didn't get to do a whole lot of, I was somewhat sheltered. I don't know. Like I wasn't going out and going to parties in high school, but I was like very strict household, And so I think that was like my first time of being like on my own, and I was really excited about it. And I'm thinking like maybe visiting my dad on the weekends, I had a lot more flexibility with that. So I was kind of used to being able to kind of like leave home for like extended periods of time. But I think it was like the first time during like midterms and final exams, and I was like, I am like struggling, and I'm wondering why I'm like so like not getting depressed, but getting a lot more anxious, or getting like where folks are going home for Thanksgiving, and I'm like, I'm staying here because flights are too expensive. And so it was tough, I think, trying to navigate that. But I think the biggest thing, and something I tell my students now, is a mentor told me that, hey, like, remember why you're here. Remember, like, go have fun, do your things, join organizations, but remember, like, the purpose of you being, like, 18 hours away from home. Like, remember that, like, sometimes you got to put your nose down, do your thing. And I think that's what kind of motivated me, is like, I'm being the first in my family to do something. It's kind of, but it's like also the added pressure, because you don't want to let them down.
It's like the first gen guilt.
Yeah, man, it's real. And so I think that kind of like fueled me to kind of keep going. But it was honestly even worse in my master's program. Was the first time where I was like second guessing, like, is this worth it? Is this worth like the stress I'm putting myself under, the nights of no sleeping, not eating, all of those things, where I was really second guessing and missing my family, where I was like, yeah, I got to go back home after this, or at least be closer to a state that's like within driving distance. So that's kind of also why I decided to come back a little bit. But
I understand that part. I know, like, being here my first year, I missed out on a lot of things because like after high school, everyone's still relatively close.
Mm-hmm.
You see like stuff on Instagram, especially with social media now. You see things like you see everything that you're missing. But like I was fortunate enough to have like my dad wrote me a note before I left, and because he wasn't like very good. He's not very good at saying like emotional things.
Yeah.
So he wrote me a note, and like they pretty much just like said like stay here because you're here for a reason.
Yeah.
Like I'd rather you be here. Like yeah, you're gonna miss out on some stuff, but you'll come back eventually, and you'll gain everything that you've lost versus coming back and because you're here so much, you're gonna be struggling over there.
Yeah.
And I think it was definitely something like I kind of was forced to stay here because I had a car, but then 2 days before I came to Baylor for line camp or no line camp, what's that? Welcome week. Yeah. I got hit, so I had to leave my car in Dallas. So I was
so you're kind of forced to stick around.
I was here because my parents were like, oh yeah, they told us not to get you until 4 to 6 weeks after, so they just left me here. And like I remember being here for Labor Day, everyone left, and I was like, oh, this campus is really empty now.
Yeah.
And that's why luckily I had JT, so when I had JT, he was here with me. But yeah, I remember after the first round of tests, I'm like, man, I want to go back. Like I miss my friends, I miss my family. But like at the end of the day, I knew if I went back, I wasn't getting any work done. And still to this day, like if I go back home, I know for that weekend,
you're just hanging out
because you gotta see your family, you gotta see friends, and by the time that happens, Sunday, you gotta go back home.
Yeah. And similar because my mom would always send me like care packages. I think that was a big thing that got me through. She would send me like because I'm telling you, man, like Iowa's great, but just not a lot of Hispanic people out there. So there's like one restaurant that wasn't like a chain. There's one small section in the grocery store that you can get like maybe chips, but she would send me like all the candies, like the gummy bears and the chamoy and all this, all that. And I was like, oh my gosh. So it was good to have that piece, and then we would FaceTime and stuff like that to get me through. But yeah, I definitely remember that first time where, probably like the Labor Day, where it was like, yeah, I'm going back home, and it was just me and my roommate because he was from my high school too.
Yeah,
we're like, what do we do, man? Like everything's closed. Like we can't what do we do? And so, man, kudos to all the first gen folks or out of state folks.
Yeah,
folks can't just go home. I'm like, it's tough, but like you kind of experienced too, like when you stick it out, you tend to appreciate and you find more things to do, or you find your other friends who are also sticking around.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's where I made really good friends with some of the guys down the hall, and actually fast forward 3 years that we ended up like joining the fraternity together. Like didn't end up seeing them for like 2 years, but you were like, hey, what's up, man? So it was cool.
Yeah, I definitely think those first couple of weeks are like where I built my like network, and it was just like it's kind of crazy to think like your freshman year, it's like the scariest, but at the same time like a lot of those connections you make freshman year, you end up running into them like senior year. Oh, like how are you doing this and that? And it's just crazy how to see how much people's lives change.
Yeah, it's oftentimes too like it maybe it's similar for you, like the people you hang out with your freshman year usually aren't the same core group that you have like senior year.
Oh yeah, no,
like you see them around.
Yeah, they dwindle very quickly. Like I know my freshman group, we lasted like maybe a month.
Yeah.
And then it was just JT was like one of the few that stuck around, and then now it's like I feel like I'm pulling so many directions. It's just like I walk down the hall and I find somebody that I know. So.
Yeah, especially going junior senior year, you're like plugged into the things you enjoy doing. Where freshman year, you're just kind of forced to like.
Yeah, freshman year, everyone's trying to figure out what they want to do, and it's just like,
trying to make friends and hang out and do everything.
Yeah, like I know a lot of the connections I made freshman year were like, oh, are you going to the party today? Oh, okay. Can I catch a ride with you? And that's like how things just started.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But my next question I have for you is, when you enter the professional world, what challenges disappeared? What new challenges did you encounter, and what challenges were consistent?
Challenges disappeared. I think this goes into just any profession. I mean, I'm working in education. I'm not making a lot of money, but it's very real being like first gen low income to now having like a salary that's more than my parents made like almost combined, where it's still not that much, but it's like to have like grown up money. Yeah. And it's like, I remember the first time when I worked in Martin Hall as a hall director, wasn't paying rent, was not spending much on gas. Insurance was cheaper because I was living where I worked. Yeah. I had like no bills, no meals, so I was like just straight income. Yeah. And so my first adult paycheck, I was like, I went crazy. Like I bought a TV, I bought a couch, I bought like all these things. I was just like, and I was like, that can't happen again because now I have no money to like, okay, now I actually got to get a phone bill. I got to do all these other things. But I feel like that was one thing that has been nice. with the college education is being able to kind of have that income that you can survive off of.
Mm-hmm.
You get that job that you enjoy, and hopefully it pays a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of the situation I was in. I was able to kind of not have to worry as much financially. I mean, I had student loans, but I was still kind of in a spot where, I think my parents raised me enough to like be able to budget and not, live too lavishly. And so that was part of that kind of got alleviated. But some of the same challenges happen. And as far as like, and I know this was one of the other questions that we were talking about the other day, but like imposter syndrome, I don't think that ever goes away. There's times where I walk into rooms and I'm a relatively quiet person when you're first meeting somebody. Have to sit down and talk with you a little bit more to open up, especially in the professional side. I'm like, I hate networking. I hate like putting myself out there. Hey, how's it going? Shaking hands, kissing babies, all this. I'm like, I cannot do that. But it's one of those challenges that's kind of, I've had to put myself in that situation to get comfortable doing it. But it's like when I walk into a room, sometimes being the only Latino, sometimes being one of 2 or 3 on campus. Like I had one of our McNairs saying, it's like, yeah, you're one of the only like Latinos on campus that's in staff position that is like actively doing stuff like, with students. I was actively trying to think like who else. I couldn't really think of anybody. And I was like that.
I think from my perspective, it's probably you, Dr. Hinosa, and Steven.
yeah.
And 2 are in the same office. So it's
Exactly. And that's the weird part is like also going with that pressure piece of like, okay, like what if I did want to get another job somewhere else?
Mm-hmm.
Like if then you feel that pressure of like, I don't want to let these guys down or like leave my community hanging. So I think the pressure, the imposter syndrome, those are all challenges that have kind of stayed throughout the time. And what was the other question?
Which challenges what new challenges did you encounter?
New challenges. Yeah. I think just being a professional and trying to drawing that line. I think I have the benefit of still being relatively young. So I can still it's now that I'm a true millennial. So like, there's like jokes that I just don't understand. Or like people will say like, that's a millennial thing. I was like, I don't even catch it. That's just like part of who I am. And I'm like, or I'll say little things or do little things with my hand. They're like, yeah, that's a millennial.
You're not the only one. I feel like I have younger cousins. Some of the stuff they say, I'm just like, am I really that old?
Yeah. It's but then with me, I'm a very personal guy. Like with our McNair Scholars, other groups, I'm like, I want to hang out. I want to like spend as much time with them as possible. Not for the sake of like, cause friends and it's for the sake of like, I just enjoy being in that community and like seeing that after we hang out like for a few times, they're then going and doing their own thing like together, which they might not have done before. But then now as I'm getting a little bit older, getting further into the profession, it's like, okay, I got to start being the more like professional thing, which is weird. I can't even like, it's hard for me to even describe it. But as I'm looking for new positions, maybe on campus and things like that, it's like, okay, I got to actually be a person of authority. But still, I think like staying true to myself of like, that's what I enjoy doing. I think it's that same thing, imposter syndrome. Like, are they going to take me seriously? Are other staff going to take me as seriously because I'm doing these types of things? Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, all those things kind of stay around.
I know like the next question, you kind of answered it, but it was like, what is imposter syndrome in your opinion? And how well, you've already said you've experienced imposter syndrome, but like, do you find that there's certain times or certain stressors when you feel like the most?
Yeah, I think how I define imposter syndrome. Yeah, I think it's just when you are in a situation where you feel like other people are, or I guess where you see yourself as not being as equipped as you truly are, or not as prepared as you truly are, or you feel like you don't equate or you don't level up as much as your peers. And I think it stays the same. I remember going into my master's program, I had the chance to go to Harvard University for an internship, and where I worked there for the summer and got to do some cool research projects and things like that, and got to teach a class. But I remember walking on the campus, and I was like, even applying and interviewing for that, I was like I do not fit in here. These folks are way too smart. This is way too prestigious. Was just like probably 90% of my time was just like I somehow snuck in here, and I'm faking it till I make it. But I think looking back, everybody was in the same boat. Just nobody was saying it out loud. And I think that goes into the professional world too, and especially being a student, but professionally, it's like, you just gotta, my biggest tip is just go at something with confidence. Mm-hmm. Just walk the walk like as if you know and you have everything going on, and then learn from the mistakes when you make them, or ask for help. But I try to go into something, if I'm going to say something, I want to make sure I'm confident in the way I say it and confident in the ability to do it. And that just grows with time. But I feel like even if you master one job, you start to move on to the next thing and you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing with this next thing. Like it doesn't really ever go away. But do you experience imposter? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, for me, I just feel like I experience it less now since I've been here for so long.
Yeah.
But I know like coming in, no one dressed the way I dressed. Like I didn't necessarily hear like coming from my company, it's a lot of slang. So it's like I would say stuff and people would correct me on my grammar, and I'd be like, oh, yeah. So it would kind of just like, oh, okay, so I can't say that. Then it was like I'd walk into my class and like I came in as a STEM person, so I was pre-med. Well, I still am pre-med, but I was bio pre-med. So I walked to my class and I remember it was like 2 or 3 days passed by before I saw someone that looked like me. Mm-hmm. And like in those 300 student classes in the BSB, there was maybe 1-2 Latinos, maybe 1-2 black people. Mm-hmm. So it was just kind of like it was very isolating.
Yeah.
And like my roommate, he was Hispanic, but he wasn't very. He was very like coconut.
Okay.
So he was very whitewashed, and he didn't really claim his Hispanic side. He kind of would hide it, and the only like indicator that he was Hispanic was his last name.
Yeah.
So it was very like I didn't have anything in common with him. I didn't see any Latinos on campus, and like I remember one night literally pulling up the stats to see like how many Latinos were on campus, and it was like, oh well, we're 12%, but like when you walk around Fountain Mall, it's like you don't see any of those people.
Yeah.
And so I think I got an imposter syndrome a lot. Like just walking around, like I just felt like everyone was looking at me, or like, they all thought I didn't belong. Yeah. Especially like in my earlier encounters with like people that were also in the STEM field, they were kind of just like, "Oh, where'd you go to high school? Where are you from?"
Yeah.
And they would kind of like make a face when I would tell them.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I didn't go to Baylor, but at that Harvard experience, I'll talk to the young kids who are incoming freshmen. To Harvard, and they would ask me like, "Oh, where did you go to undergrad?" And I'd say, "Oh, Northern," and they would just like zone out after everything else I was talking. They're like, "Oh," like it was like disgusted or something. I was like, so I can imagine like, it was like, whoa, okay. And then you start to overthink like, okay, then the person next to me who's in the same role is at Princeton, or like the other person is a Harvard student already. I was like, oh man, like how did I get here? Yeah, man, I think that's the unfortunate reality, but it's normal. It's I wish it wasn't that way, but it is.
Yeah, it's definitely something that like I had to learn to cope with, and it was like I just kind of figured someone has to do it. Like especially being here at Baylor, I remember wanting to transfer out. I was literally looking up at like UTRGV. Cause I was like, oh, 98% Hispanic. That sounds pretty nice right now. But I was just looking up. I was like, then for me, staying at Baylor was like, if I can do it, then my like kids one day will know. I'm like, I made it through Baylor, so you could. I crawled so you could walk.
Yeah.
And so that was definitely something I kept back on my mind, especially that my parents like. And I remember in high school, I wanted to go to like a big university just because. Like my high school, there was maybe like I would say like 20 kids max that would go to college, and a lot of them, like 15 of them, would stay within like that 10-mile radius. So they would be living at home, but they'd be going to like, oh, UTA.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's nothing wrong with UTA, but at the same time, I feel like you never get to grow and experience new things.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you're like at my home sheltered, and I'm not pressured to make new friends because I can always go home.
Yeah.
And so that's where Baylor was like the sweet spot for me, because like like our group really, I think it's just a Latino thing. You grow up like really close to your family, and like moving away is kind of like seen as like why.
Yeah.
And so Waco was like an hour and a half away, so I was like, you know what, it's close enough where like I'm too close to my family. If I want to go home for the weekend, I can. But at the same time, I can be my own person. It's like I can't necessarily be like, oh, I'm gonna call my mom or dad for this. It's like I have to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
And especially I think having a younger brother, it's like I had to figure things out because I knew he was coming here. So it's like I'd rather be plugged in and help him versus have him face the exact same thing that I had to go through.
Yeah. And I feel like that's one thing that, especially like a lot of the first gen folks, and I'm glad that we have like such a strong first gen kind of programming, because I feel like that's you need to find a support network somewhere. And I think through shared lived experiences, you're able to kind of coach and mentor and kind of do these things where Maybe in other places you don't really get, like maybe at a UT. I don't know what it looks like at UTA, or maybe these even smaller schools where folks are like, I'm just gonna stay in my even smaller town.
Yeah.
And not really trying to like you said, like leave the house. We don't really ever get that, or you don't have that challenge of being able to navigate those differences, or even navigating like seeing somebody for the first time who's from like a different country and having that interaction. So kudos to you, man. Yeah, for making it out here, dude.
Yeah, I got like like affirmed that it wasn't just like the college that makes it, because like I know my brother, he had two friends that went to UT, one of the most diverse schools in the country. They did not come out of their dorm, and they said there was nobody that looked like them, and I was like, yeah. If you think nobody looks like you there, don't come over here. Don't come over here.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because when I lived in Iowa, then I moved to Waco. I got here, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many like Hispanic Latinos here. Like I was like, they're everywhere. I was like, this is awesome. But then when you start to slowly like let it settle in, you're like, okay, in reality, there's actually not.
Reality, if it feels like you see the same 15 faces.
Exactly.
It's like, oh yeah, I remember you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. My next question is, what advice would you give to students right now who are facing similar challenges that you faced?
Yeah, I would say just remember your why. Like, why are you here? What was the purpose of you deciding when to go to college? Why did you leave home to come to Baylor? Even looking at your discipline, at your major, why did you choose business finance? Is it something that you chose, or something that maybe your family's choosing? Because that adds that pressure too.
Yeah.
Because imagine you're a medical student because you're in your first gen, or pre-med student, first gen, out of state, and you just don't want to do pre-med. But then you have that family pressure, like, okay, you're going to school to become a doctor. Because I remember my parents were like, you're going to go to college and you're going to make a lot of money, like right off the bat. I was like, I did psychology. There's no money in, like unless you go to get your PhD and stuff like that, you're not getting a whole lot. So having to explain that too is tough. But making sure that you're doing you're choosing your path based off of something you enjoy. Because sometimes we're told, being first gen and in the Hispanic culture, you go to college to make a lot of money. But I've started to build that idea of you go to college to get the job that you enjoy, and if it pays a lot of money, that's awesome. Some people like love medicine, and I'm like, those are the folks I want to be my doctor. How much you can just rattle off stuff, like that's who I want to be my doctor. But for somebody who's struggling to get by, or just not really enjoying it, or not really understanding the purpose of why they're doing that, it gets to you. And it's oftentimes some of the folks who leave, who are like, I'm doing all this, what's the cost for? What is this even for? Like, I can just go to the college down back in my hometown. There's other reasons. Financials are always important, but I think when you remember, like, okay, I'm here to do something I really enjoy. I'm here because, like, I want to be the first in my family to do this thing. I want to set my life up, set my future family up. I think it helps you kind of stay motivated. Another piece of advice is to get involved. Find people, find organizations. I always say, like, the rule of twos, like in your first year, is get yourself involved in like a personal, like a social organization, and then a professional organization. That way you can balance your classes. You have two other commitments, and then maybe work if you have to work, or you have to get a job or do something for income. Because I think those are all different avenues where you're meeting new people. You're finding with the organizations, you're finding folks who are doing things that you're already interested in or already involved in. Work, everybody has that one work friend, or that one somebody that you enjoy working with, or you're just getting income, and that's an opportunity for you to get that money in your pocket. So I think when you find that balance and you're able to kind of manage the time well, I think that's going to kind of progress you through each year, because then you'll start to be more comfortable handling that. You feel more confident going into other organizations. And then that goes into like junior, senior, where that's all a breeze, like where almost school becomes like second nature. Yeah. Now you're just focusing on the organizations because you already know how to study. You already know how to do all these other things. Now it's like, okay, I'm trying to like enjoy my time, or like really build myself as a professional. Yeah. So yeah, I would say just get involved and just remember like why you're here at Baylor. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just going off of that, like I know, especially like a lot of the, like the societal pressure, or like my grandparents were like, oh, you're gonna be a doctor, like you're gonna be rich, and it's like they don't understand, like they're like, oh, you have one more year, but they don't understand it's like undergrad, and like And like I know, like for me right now, like after undergrad, 7 years, 8 years of medical school doesn't sound appetizing, and it's very like, when am I gonna start? Like in my mind, it's like, when am I gonna start making money? And so like I know, like for me, I'm sociology, so it's like I have a business administration minor, but now I'm looking into like master's programs because it's like I gotta find some way to get some money, but it's like at the same time, it's just like I remember having that conversation with my parents about like, you know, what if I don't want to do medicine, or what if I don't want to do this? And like my parents always say this one thing. They're always like, you know, just find whatever makes you happy, and the money will come eventually. Yeah. And they always say that they're like, you could be a teacher for all you care, like for all we care. Like, we're gonna be proud of you regardless, just as long as like their thing is always just do something you love. And they just want us to get to like that piece of, like they always say, the piece of paper for like the degree, because like my parents work in the medical field. Like my mom, like my parents get underpaid because they don't have the piece of paper.
Gotcha.
So it's like that's like their whole thing is like, you know, if we had that piece of paper, we'd be able to get this position. And like especially like later, like as my mom progresses in her career, it's just kind of like she can't get this position because she doesn't have that piece of paper. She's like, well, if I'd have went to school, because my mom started college but she didn't finish it.
Okay. Yeah.
So she was very like, she's very adamant, has been very adamant. Me and my brother, like, you know, just finish, even if you don't want to be a doctor, at least you have that piece of paper to secure you.
Yeah. And it goes on, like, yes, there's that piece of just getting your education is going to take you a lot further than anything. But when you go through all 4 years of college, or 2 years, however quickly, 5 years, 6 years, I feel like you get that experience of being able to, like, you now have 4 or 5 years of networking experience. You have experience of, like, I bet freshman year you didn't think you would be hosting a podcast.
Oh yeah, no.
Or, you know, like, or being in a fraternity and being like an exec member, you know, in these organizations. Like, I was in the same boat. Like I told myself I'm going to go all the way to Iowa, get my degree, and go back home. But there I was, like, the next year, like, running on stage, hey, welcome to campus, you know, orientation leader. And then I was an RA. And then I was a tour guide. Like, I did everything to, like, try and get involved. Those are all, or president of the fraternity. I was like, fraternity life is not for me. It's not my thing. Yeah. And then there I was, like, doing all that. And so, but I think that's what it's about, because you find the things that you enjoy. And I think college is one of the best times of your life. And there's times where I miss it. There's times where I'm like, okay, I have dreams still of, like, waking up and I'm missing, like, a math exam where I didn't study. I'm like, wait, no, I'm not. I don't have any. Like, I'm good. Just go back to sleep. So there's times where I don't envy y'all at all. But yeah, man. Yeah, I think, like what you said with your parents, they're there to support you regardless. I mean, some folks have very different situations. Yeah. But when you have yourself, like, that family support, that makes life a little bit less stressful to be like, okay, they're in my corner no matter what. I can't really disappoint anybody. Now it's just, how hard do I want to work to get the life or career that I'm going to be, like, truly happy with. Yeah.
So my next question for you is, what advice would you give to a younger version of yourself?
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking through this one, and it was like, study mechanical engineering or something, you know what I mean? So I was like, that's where the money's at. But I was like, I was never that good at science. But I think the biggest thing is just to ask for help, you know, utilize resources. Cause I was in the boat where I was just getting through the degree just to get C's and a couple A's and B's in, like, easier classes, but I just needed to get the degree to be done. And I was like, I already going from high school, I did not enjoy school. I was like, I did not want to go to college. And it was all because I went to a family barbecue and the recruiter was there and he convinced me to go. Yeah. That's another long story, but and he ended up being my mentor all until now. Like, I'm still getting life advice from him. He's still in Iowa, but just to... Yeah, that's a good question, man. I'm really thinking about it. Like, the biggest advice, I just want to make sure that to do something that you're happy with, to make sure that you can be committed to those types of things, and you know, just asking for help and being willing to receive the help. You know, because I can be very hard-headed. Like, I was trying to figure it out on my own, and I just, like I said, just wanted to get the C's or get the degree to just pass the class. I didn't care about learning it. But then master's degree, I had the opportunity to do that, and it was a free program, and I was going to get paid on top of that. So I was like, why wouldn't I go and do that? And the same guy, convinced me to go out there. Jesus Lizarraga, now Dr. Lizarraga, convinced me to go out there, and it changed my life forever. Like I was able to finally see like, okay, I really enjoyed being an RA, enjoyed being a tour guide, and enjoyed like mentoring like new tour guides. And he was the one who told me, like, you can do this as like a job. Like you can be a mentor for these students who are trying to get involved and do the thing or make campus feel like a home. You can do that for like a career. I was like, interesting. You can study that. Like why, like what can you do to make a student feel like at home or comfortable? And I was like, all right, cool. Let's do that then. So that's what opened that. And it was just like, okay, now I'm like in a job where I'm like truly happy, you know, where I get to wake up every day and, you know, I'll go to Miami on Sunday to go take students to a conference. A couple weeks ago, I was in Baltimore, same thing. And we had a game night the other night and got pizza yesterday, did some bowling, you know, so it's like all things like that. Like what other job is going to allow you to just have fun, you know, like that, where I can, you know, just be, hey, I'm going to step out for an hour. I'm going to go get coffee with the student. Like,
there's not very many jobs, especially in the corporate world. It's kind of like,
exactly. And so I think going back to the advice I give myself is just keep pushing on, just keep, you know, find something that you truly enjoy, and do it for the right reasons. Because I think I went into college, I was going to do business. I was doing exercise science. I switched to psychology. I just pretty much just started off, okay, what can make me the most money? I didn't understand a lick of what was going on with business stuff. Exercise science, I liked working out. But I was horrible in all the sciences. And then I was like, what's like one of the easier degrees that I can kind of still get credits in my stuff? Went to psychology, and I was still like not really passionate about it. I really enjoyed what I was learning a little bit more, but I just wasn't happy doing it. Like I still use a lot of that stuff today. But I was just like, I just need something that's gonna like be less exercise science, like STEM, and more social sciences, where I can feel like I'm at least helping people. But even then, man, I was just like trying to just get out. So I'd say, just for everybody, just choose something that you are truly going to enjoy. Because I feel like maybe for sociology for you, or maybe it's maybe that business piece, you're like, okay, it finally clicks. Or like you're like, okay, I actually really like this. I never found that until my master's program.
I think that's great advice, honestly, for anybody. I know in my experience, I've shared at least a couple of those. So I think students will really enjoy that one. And this last, on a lighter note, what superpowers would you have and why?
Superpower? Oh man, my mind always goes to teleportation. Like I like to travel a lot. So going to like Barcelona in spring, went to Belize this last winter. So I like to travel a lot. All of those were luckily work trips. Same thing. I was like, what other job can you just go, you know? But I like to travel. So I think, having that ability to just like, bam, snap your fingers and just go. Would be pretty cool. What about you? What would you choose?
I always say teleportation, but no one ever says it. And it's always like, I always get a lot of like, oh, super strength, or I wish I could fly. And I'm just like, you aren't seeing the vision.
But you gotta, if you could teleport, you could fly for at least, a little bit, then teleport back up or something,
Exactly. I'm like, I could be in Disney World right now and I'm there.
Exactly. Yep. Did you ever see, it's like that old Hayden Christensen movie, Jumper? Where he teleports all over the place. But that was where I was like, oh yeah, like he was like going into like bank vaults and all kinds of stuff. But
I thought about that side too. I was like, you know what, like you could be a criminal, you'd never be caught.
Exactly.
But I think I came to this conclusion whenever I saw like the X-Men movie for the first time. I saw Nightcrawler and I was like, oh, you just teleport wherever.
Exactly. Yeah, teleportation, man, hands down.
Well, I just thank you so much for taking your time out of your day, Rico, to come talk to the audience and talk to me. At this time, I'll let you take the floor if there's any programs you would like to advertise or anything like that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I appreciate that. So we have our McNair Scholars program. Application closes. I'm not sure when this will be released, but November 1st is our priority deadline. December 1st is our application will close. So for those wanting to learn a bit about McNair, it's just a program for first gen underrepresented students who want to go from undergrad to a PhD program. So we kind of support you with research opportunities and things like that. Other things, we have Hispanic Student Association still kicking off, doing its thing. They have general meetings, so check those out if you're interested in getting involved with that. ODFI, we'll start their recruitment processes and things like that too. So all good groups of students. And man, just thank you so much I feel like this was good. This is like, I haven't been able to talk about this stuff in a while.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I started this podcast. I just feel like a lot of these conversations are good, and like students don't necessarily don't know who to go to, or they're like scared of opening up. But I feel like with a lot of the faculty here, like they want to share their stories. They just never asked about it. So it's like,
it was a lot of times where I was like, where am I going with this? I was like, man, I haven't thought about that in a long time, or I'm trying to like, just haven't had the chance to speak about it. So this is good. It was like a not a weight off my shoulders, but it felt very refreshing.
Yeah.
To talk about. So I appreciate you for thinking about me and bringing me on.
Of course. Cool. All right, well, yeah. Thank you all for tuning in, guys, and I'll be here next week with the next guest.